Here is a little story psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan tells us to illustrate one of the many fascinating things he says about anxiety. By anxiety, Lacan is talking about a sensation that feels like dread, or more precisely, expectant dread. Lacan talked for an entire year about the subject of anxiety in his 10th seminar, now turned into a book. But he actually first came up with this story the year before, in Seminar 9, which isn't yet a book, officially. Imagine, he says, you're in front of a female praying mantis. Now, these lovely ladies are known for biting off the heads of their partners after sex. No one really knows why, but Wikipedia says that about 90% of them engage in sexual cannibalism. So you're in front of this female praying mantis and you're wearing a mask of another praying mantis. But the catch is that you don't know whether you're wearing the mask of a male or a female. So you don't know whether you're going to be eaten or not, because you don't know how the creature in front of you sees you. This is why Lacan describes anxiety as the sensation of the desire of the other. Lacan's idea is that we get anxiety when we don't know what we are for the other, what they want from us, and this is what the story with the praying mantis shows. Anxiety is, if nothing else, the sensation that someone wants something from you, or that you're expected to give them something that concurs with how they see you. It might be your boss at work, your parent or a caregiver if you're a baby, or just that feeling you get when there's a knock at the door or your phone rings when you're not expecting it. The idea that anxiety is the sensation of the other's desire is a beautifully simple one, and it short-circuits some of the more commonplace, even silly descriptions of anxiety in psychoanalysis. That it stems from trauma, like the trauma of birth, or that it's about the loss of an object, a person or an ideal, or the loss of the love of an object or person. In fact, Freud had the same intuition back in the 1890s, writing about how the appearance of anxiety may be dependent on the satisfaction of the other person. But it's also quite a strange idea. In psychoanalysis, even the relation of the infant to its mother, in fact, especially the relation of the infant to its mother, is never simply one of unconditional love. As Melanie Klein emphasizes more than any other psychoanalyst, love is never a purity. It's always refracted through a prism of ambivalence, aggression, frustration, and disappointment. The idea that anxiety is the sensation of the other's desire might sound pretty vague, but isn't the experience of anxiety itself vague? This is why when we experience anxiety, it's often free-floating, the sense of a generalized state of trepidation that can take hold at any moment without warning. That expectant dread again. We can't always point to something we're anxious about. There may be certain triggers in our day-to-day, but most of them are unlikely to be real and present dangers to our physical survival that would warrant the level of anxiety we feel. But for Lacan, neither is anxiety really about the threats of a loss of something or the lack of something. In fact, for him, it's the opposite. It's the feeling of an over-proximity of the desire of the other. It's the feeling we get, Lacan says, when lack itself lacks. This is why Lacan says that anxiety is not without an object. Its object is just obscure. I'm anxious because the object is not one I could have, but one that I could be for the other. The problem is I don't know what I am in order to be it. Lacan refers to the desire of the other with a capital O and not just any other person, because in his story I'm the one wearing the mask. If I don't know what mask I'm wearing, then I don't know how they see me, and fundamentally I don't know who I am. This is why later in Seminar 9, Lacan returns to the image of the praying mantis and is especially interested in the eye or the gaze of the mantis. If I'm in front of a praying mantis, what I should see is my image reflected in its eye. But I don't, because I'm wearing a mask. This is what Lacanians call a disruption of the imaginary register, a disturbance at the level of the image, and it often marks the start of anxiety. All of a sudden, I don't know who I am because I don't know how the other sees me. Anxiety begins from this essential moment when this image is lacking, Lacan says. When I don't have the crutch of the image to lean on and the belief that this image is me, I don't know what place I have as an object in their desire. I have no bearings, no reference point, no identity. But surely we know what the other wants from us. They tell us. They ask us for something, and then we can either agree or disagree, accept or refuse. But Lacan's point is that there's always something they want from us that is beyond this demand, beyond what they tell us they want, and perhaps they don't know themselves. Their desire, as Lacan calls it, will always remain somewhat other, enigmatic and fundamentally foreign to us. Desire for Lacan is something that sneaks in under the guise of demand. It's very different from a wish or a want because it's conditional on an X factor that Lacan calls the middle term between demand and desire, which has another name in psychoanalysis, but we'll save that for later. So what can we do about anxiety? Lacan gives us some clues. Our strategies to manage anxiety really need to be strategies to negotiate our relationship with the desire of the other, what we are for them, what they want from us, and what our response to it should be. And in particular, our proximity to their desire to allow some space of our own to be carved out, separate from theirs. This isn't something it's easy to figure out, and that's why psychoanalysis is about taking the time, care, and attention to explore it. But more fundamentally, do we really want to get rid of anxiety? Anxiety can function as a signal, for example, the signal of a danger, which we might know as fear. We may not be encountering lions, praying mantis, and other wild animals on a day-to-day basis, but there are deeper threats to our sense of self, our identity, our ego. Both Lacan and Freud are super careful about rushing to remove anxiety without knowing its place, the function it has to protect us against dangers that are even more threatening than spiders, snakes, or tall buildings. Anxiety is not one thing. It has many manifestations, both psychically, like in phobias, and physically, heart palpitations, panic attacks, etc. But we start to see how impoverished many contemporary views of anxiety are when we don't look at the function of anxiety and just focus on getting rid of it. To give an example of how Lacan's theory of anxiety as the sensation of the over-proximity of the desire of the other is used, let's take the case of phobia. Lacan thinks that phobia, at least in children, is really an attempt to triangulate. With the phobic object, we bring something in as a response to the overbearing proximity of the desire of the other, a new element that functions to get us some space from this enigmatic and claustrophobic desire. A phobia might be frightening for the child, but its job is to manage what is even more existentially terrifying by giving it an image and a localization. Spiders, bridges, tall buildings, etc. It's an attempt to capture in an image what is fundamentally too foreign, too mysterious about the desire of the other for the child to handle. So in order to resolve a childhood phobia, Lacan's idea is that the child needs to shift this image onto some other element, to mobilize it and move it away from the phobic object so that it can take on another meaning or signification. This might happen by itself once the function of the phobia is performed. So to put it in Lacanian jargon, a childhood phobia is the imaginarization of the real. Treating it involves the symbolization of the imaginary. This isn't everything that Lacan says about anxiety, but it's one of the more interesting parts of his theory. Go to lacanonline.com to read more.